All right, so for this particular project, what we're going to do is we're going to take our pelicans and add some motion blur to the wings of our pelicans, and it's going to look more like this. So the first thing that we want to do is straighten out the horizon of our image. And the first step is to double click on our background layer to unlock it and create a new layer. Once you do that, grab your crop tool with the letter C and make sure that the ratio is set to original. Then click and grab from an outside corner and rotate it until the grid lines up with the horizon. Once you do that, go ahead and hit the return key or the enter key on your keyboard and the crop will be applied. All right, so the next step is to apply a smart filter. We're going to right click and click on convert to smart object. And then once we're done applying the motion blur to our pelicans from the filter gallery, the smart filter will be applied just below it, just like in the previous project. So now we need to go up to filter, scroll down to blur gallery and select path blur. All right, we're now back into the filter blur gallery and we can make our adjustments to the path of our blur, which right now is moving from left to right, and you can click on the front of the arrow and then change the direction of the movement. Since we're focusing on the wings of the pelicans, I'm going to do top to bottom. And it doesn't really matter the distance that you create for that particular path. It's all going to go in the same direction. So now we can see that the motion appears to be coming up and down versus left to right, which is the default setting. Then you can come over here to path and make additional adjustments to the blurring depending on the effect that you want to create. We do have some options under motion effects to increase the strength of that movement as well as the number of flashes. And I'm just going to leave it at 0% and 4, which are the default settings. And then we can also make some adjustments to change the blur from centered to non-centered. And I think we'll go ahead and do uncentered. So go ahead and uncheck this option here. And then with endpoint speed, we can increase the motion blur for that particular direction that we're creating, or we can decrease it. So I think I'm going to keep it right around 170. And you can do whatever pleases your creative eye. And we can also increase the speed as well to increase the amount of motion blur being applied along that path. I'm just going to leave it around 50% for now. And then that's it, at least for this part. So we're going to go ahead and click OK so we can get back to the Photoshop interface. And we now have our smart filter applied to this layer. And if we turn it off, we can see that the motion blur is gone. And we can add it back by turning it back on. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we want the rest of the image to be in focus. We only want the wings to show some kind of motion blur. So as you know, with mask filters, white adds and black removes. So we need to invert this mask in order to remove the filter effect to this image. And the quickest way to do that is with our keyboard shortcut, which is Command or Control and the letter I, and that automatically changes our layer mask to black, which removes the entire effect from the image. So now what we need to do is we need to apply white to our mask, and that will allow the filter effect to come through and show exactly where we want it. And to do that, we're going to select our brush tool with the letter B. Then we're just going to click and paint in the areas where we want to apply that blur effect. So just make sure that your settings for your brush are set up properly. If you have a hard edge, it's not going to look very natural. So I'm going to go between 0 and 50%. Actually, I'm going to do 30%. And then opacity, again, if you want 100%, it's probably not going to look very natural. So bring the opacity down and then you can continue painting over that area to build up that motion effect until you get the results that you want. Now that our brush is set up properly the way we need it, we can just click and paint over the areas where we want to apply that blur motion. How cool is that? I love it. All right, so we can just paint over the areas where we want to apply it. And now we have some motion blur on our pelicans. So go ahead and grab this image from the resources section and go ahead and apply what you've learned to this particular image. And the next time you're out shooting, think about how you can create motion either in camera or via Photoshop if you're unable to capture it while in the field.